Earthquake Myths by Emily Masuda. An earthquake happens when two lithospheric plates slide past each other. This causes the earth to shake. Now we know all the different plate boundaries. When there is a transform boundary and two plates slide past each other, an earthquake is formed. A long time ago, people didn't know this. Earthquake myths were created to explain earthquakes. A long time ago, when there wasn't good technology, there wasn't a scientific explanation for why earthquakes existed. People made up reasons to explain why the ground shook. There are also modern myths that are very common, even though we have the technology to prove these wrong. Most of these are based on events that have happened during or before some earthquakes, but don't occur consistently. One of the modern myths is that the safest place to be during an earthquake is under a doorway. This is said to be true because when the buildings weren't safe a long time ago, the doorways were the most dirty part of the house. Now the rest of the house is sturdy, and since the door swings and there are people trying to run through the doorways, this myth is not true. A common modern myth is that the ground can open up and swallow people, cars, and homes when an earthquake happens. This is not possible because if the ground opened up, there would be no friction. Friction is required for an earthquake to happen. Some people believe that earthquakes occur in the morning or during earthquake weather. This is not true because since the process of earthquakes happen underground, earthquakes cannot sense time or weather. In Los Angeles, the building codes are very strict, so some people believe that since this is true, all of the buildings here are safe. This is not true because some of the buildings were built before the building codes were made, so they are not very safe. It is up to the owners whether they want to improve the buildings or not. Another one of the modern myths is that animals can sense earthquakes before they occur. It is said that the animals sometimes act strangely before the ground starts to shake. Scientists have done research and found out that even though sometimes animals do act strangely, this is not because of the earthquakes. The animals don't act strangely before the earthquakes consistently, and it is only a coincidence when this happens. Along with these modern myths, there are also ancient earthquake myths. Ancient earthquake myths from different parts of the world are usually based on the culture of the country. Most countries have at least one earthquake myth. Many of these myths include animals or gods that are well known in the country. Africa is the second biggest continent in the world and is south of Europe and southwest of Asia. Africa has many interesting earthquake myths. Many of the myths from West Africa are about giants, but a myth from East Africa is about animals. Also, in a myth from Mozambique, the earth itself is responsible for the earthquakes. I think that in West Africa, giants were very important. A myth from Mozambique is that the earth has problems like humans do. Sometimes, when it gets sick and has a fever and chills, we can feel it shaking. One common myth from West Africa is that the earth is a flat disk, and on one side the earth is held up by a mountain, and on the other side it is held up by a giant. The giant's wife holds up the sky. When the giant and his wife hug, the earth shakes and there's an earthquake. Another West African myth is that there is a giant that carries the earth on his head. All the plants on earth are his hair, and the people and animals are the insects crawling through it. He usually sits and faces the east, but sometimes he turns and there's an earthquake. A myth from East Africa is that a giant fish carries a stone on his back, and a cow stands on that stone, balancing the earth on one of her horns. Whenever her neck aches, she tosses the globe from one horn to another, causing an earthquake. Like Africa, Asia also has some earthquake myths. Asia is the largest continent and also has the largest population out of the 7 continents. Many Asian earthquake myths incorporate animals, so I think that in Asia, animals were very important. One very common Asian myth is that 4 elephants hold up the earth, and they stand on the back of a turtle. The turtle is balanced on top of a cobra. If one of these animals move, the earth trembles, causing an earthquake. In Japan, a myth was that a catfish, or Namzu, was curled up under the sea. He held the islands of Japan on his back. The only problem was this catfish was very mischievous. The god had to hold a rock over his back to keep him from escaping. Whenever the god let his guard down, the catfish would thrash about, causing an earthquake. There is a myth from Assam. In this myth, it is said that there is a race of people living inside the earth. Sometimes, when they want to find out if anyone is still living on the surface, they shake the earth. To let the people on the inside know, the earthlings would shout, alive. Overall, I think that there are many interesting earthquake myths. It is interesting to see how all the different earthquake myths show a little bit of culture. I've shared most of the common earthquake myths, but there are many more to discover. Thank you for watching my presentation. I got my information from sjud.org and scec.org. My photos were from Google Images.